Walking Wake is an awful Pokemon, is what I would have said if you asked me that question a month ago. Now Walking Wake is a behemoth. Before the DLC, Walking Wake was a good Pokemon, but it was outclassed by a lot of different threats. It was super strong and obviously probably the best Sun Sweeper that we have ever had, with Hydro Steam plus Photosynthesis potential speed. You could be specs, you could be special attack boosting. It actually had a decent amount of versatility for the limited move pool that it had. The problem we ran into is if the opposing team had a good water type and a good fairy type, you were walled completely. It was very hard to play around those Pokemon. You had no momentum moves and no way to push progress, and while Walking Wake was like a good second or third option, a lot of people were trying to use it as the first best option, and it just doesn't break for itself. It has a lot of counters, specifically water and fairy types, and it was very hard to find yourself in a position to win the game with Walking Wake as it was before the DLC. However, now Walking Wake has access to both Flip Turn and Knockoff and Scald, which a lot of people rave about. I don't really think that matters too much in Draft League, in my opinion. Outside of some teams, yeah, that could matter, but we're talking Walking Wake at its best. Scald really doesn't matter at all. Flip Turn and Knockoff are where these Pokemon shine. Before, it had access to pretty much no utility, and now we have access to momentum and to get rid of the items on our checks so we can whittle them down. And some fairies don't have recovery this generation, so knocking off their leftovers means that they cannot switch in later. You can knock off an Eviolite of a Pokemon like Chansey that wants to switch in, knock off leftovers from something like Blissey that wants to switch in, which I know are not water and fairy types, after I just made the point that water and fairy types wall this Pokemon, but they were still checks. Now there are very few options to actually wall Walking Wake, because when you go into your good fairy type, you're like, I'm making him choose between which move he wants to lock into, since Specs is usually the best item on this Pokemon, choice item in general. Now you can't really do that because it can Flip Turn out on you and go into an adequate check, such as like a Goldingo, like Star has paired in the GBU. And Goldingo can obviously take care of those fairies no problem, and it's a lot better at enabling other Pokemon now, as well as switching out on its checks, which help you get into positions to beat its checks, which helps ultimately Walking Wake in the in-game, which is what these changes are all about and why I think Wake is actually good now. On top of that, knocking off items, a lot of times people's checks to this Pokemon are like Avialoma, which like in BBR we saw against Owen, it was his only check, but it's like one of the best checks that you can have. Now, not only can you Flip Turn on it to get into an adequate position to be able to beat that Pokemon, now you can knock off that Assault Vest or knock off those leftovers so Pokemon don't have longevity, they can't take those special hits. Two massive buffs that are supremely overlooked, and when you only really needed Hydro Steam and Draco Meteor before, sometimes Flamethrower depending on the matchup, it got pretty much the best tools that this Pokemon could ask for outside of like Nasty Plot or something like that. It has the base 109 speed tier, and like we said earlier, it is the best Sun Sweeper in the game. Hydro Steam getting boosted not only in Sun but also in Rain, also having access to Photosynthesis, so if you don't have a Sun team, you're able to run Booster, or if you do have a Sun team, you can run Specs and still get a speed or special attack boost, or run Scarf, get the special attack boost. It's a whole thing. It's like a really good Pokemon now, like a 16-17 point Pokemon now, in my opinion. Like before, it was like, this is like a third option Pokemon, but now it is like a solidified number 2 option, and if this is your best Pokemon on the wheel, I could honestly realistically see that if you pair it with another decent enough Sun Sweeper, you set up the in-game for the Sun teams. And another buff that isn't necessarily a buff to the Pokemon, specifically in Draft League, is the fact that there are now 2 Sunsetters. Torkoal was really good and obviously is the superior Sunsetter, but now you don't have to rely on Torkoal. Obviously, with Photosynthesis running around everywhere, Torkoal is a hot commodity this generation. And a lot of times, people who drafted Wake wouldn't get Sun because people see, I don't want to play Wake with Sun. That makes sense. They have some usability for it. Now you're able to grab Ninetales, which is, it sounds so silly that Ninetales is a buff for Walking Wake, but having the option to draft 2 Sunsetters makes drafting this Pokemon a lot more viable. Ultimately, I was an absolute Wake hater before the DLC, but the way it stands now, I would love to give Wake another try, and this isn't even talking about it with Terra. With Terra, this mon is another behemoth. I think it was probably before DLC really good with Terra, but without Terra, that's where it fell short. But now it has all of these new tools, specifically Flip Turn and Knockoff, as well as another Sunsetter that you can potentially draft, and on top of that, you could throw Terra into the mix. It's a very good Pokemon, and I don't know how I truly think about it. If it's 16 points, if it's 17 points, I don't know if I think it's better than Chi-Yu. So there's some tough calls to make in the future. regarding Walking Wake, its point value, how people really think about it. Let me know down below what you guys think of Walking Wake, and while you're down there, leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Only about 50% of my viewers are subscribed, and it means the world and helps me out a ton if you hit that subscribe button. I think I'm gonna get out of here though. That's all I gotta say about Walking Wake being actually good now from being really bad before. So thank you guys so much for watching, and for now guys, this has been John Jr. signing out.